Hello from the Garrett Public Library for this week's Railroader Reading. I'm Neal, and hopefully everyone's hopped along past Peter into another good week. I will be reading from the book Sharp Dressed Men by David Blayney, a story about a little old band from Texas, ZZ Top, written by an older version of a college kid who liked to surf more than attend school. He started out repurposing his maxi van as a cheaper alternative for ZZ's roadie crew equipment transport in 1969, becoming their lighting director and designer, production manager and designer, and stage manager. Billy Gibbons on lead guitar, Dusty Hill on bass guitar, and Frank Beard on drums made up the musically talented final members of ZZ Top. Their determined and ambitious manager, Bill Ham, had met and signed up Gibbons prior to the band's formation to mold great talent into superstardom. The most interesting and entertaining aspect to me were the gigs and tour stories. I'm going to excerpt from Chapter 4, From Low Budget to Legendary first. A couple of months after that first big night at Panther Hall, Ham got the band into a memorably forgettable gig. Win ZZ Top for a Day was a promotion that some Houston radio station thought was a good idea. That fact alone should have sent up the red flags. The contest prize was a party featuring live music by ZZ, to which the winner could invite 50 of his or her closest friends. Ham was taking whatever jobs for the band he could get in order to give them exposure to the masses, no matter how infinitesimal the mass of masses might be, as well as to generate a little cash flow. Consequently, when he booked the boys a gig, you never knew what to expect. It's not so bad nowadays, but back in the early 70s, one of the first things you could count on was this. If a radio station tried to do the production for a show all by itself, without the help of the band or a promoter, you could rest assured that something, or everything, was going to be totally messed up. The case of Win ZZ Top for a Day was proof positive of this. The happening spot was a small meeting room off the main concourse of a big shopping mall in Houston. Sounds good? No way. This party room closely resembled a concrete blockhouse. The walls were made of cinder blocks and the floor was polished cement. If you'd put a drain in the middle, hung a tire from a rope, and put bars on one side, it would have made a dandy primate cage. Such ingredients are not exactly conducive to perfecto acoustic quality. The place echoed like an oversized shower stall. To top things off, the poor schmuck who won the band was only 14 years old, and either the kid didn't have any friends to invite, or he was too shy to invite the few he had. Moreover, the kid's parents dropped him off and then headed into the mall to do a little bargain hunting. Not a single soul besides the kid had showed up by party time. Under the circumstances, most bands would have packed up and left. But not ZZ. The band felt sorry for the little guy and played anyway. This streak of humanity was a trait Billy, Frank, and Dusty would retain throughout their careers. They had compassion for their fans and felt duty-bound to deliver their music to the best of their ability, no matter what size the crowd. This time, they even asked the crew to go on a search and seizure mission throughout the mall to try and find some likely candidates to come to the party. A few kids were finally recruited. Cokes were sent for because the radio station hadn't thought, or were too cheap, to provide any. And in general, the band tried to make the best of a situation that seemed doomed from the start. At a show like this, ZZ tended more to rehearse than to perform. But this wasn't bad. The boys' rehearsals were often more entertaining than a regular show. This was because they would play material they couldn't do at regular appearances. when they needed to play their own original music. For rehearsals, they could dust off all the oldies but goodies they had cut their musical teeth on. In a casual situation like Win ZZ Top for a day, the crew would sometimes join in on percussion instruments. The whole Win ZZ Top for a Day farce turned out to be an unexpected success due to the band's sheer determination to give that kid a party. Everybody's opinion was that it might be his last, but by the end of the day, the kid at least looked happier than he had when he arrived. Who knows? It might well have marked the start of a nerd recovery. Things came to an end. However, when the kid's parents finished their shopping spree, they picked him up without even coming inside to see what their son had won, and left. I hope that out there somewhere there is a former nerd with a fond memory of owning ZZ Top for a day. As for those radio station promoters who never even checked on how things were going, I hope they wound up hustling the ratings on Alaska's North Slope. The next excerpts are from an extravagant tour that put the fans over the top with delight and the crew over the edge of sanity. The name of the tour was pretty good, the ZZ Top Worldwide Texas Tour. But after that, there were some real questionable selections. The first seemingly cockeyed notion that Ham locked in was to incorporate a full-size steer into the production. Actually, I could see it. There's nothing like a steer to make people think of Texas. Trouble was, a steer is one big animal. Where could we put it? Not out in front. Can't see the band that way. Plus, the boys might wind up stepping in something. But if it's to one side of the stage, that throws off the whole symmetry of the set. What about putting a buffalo on the other side? Someone proposed. Ham turned the idea over in his head. Before we knew it, a buffalo was on the list of production items. This was just the start of things. With a steer and a buffalo already established as part of the show, adding other gimmicks in the same vein was natural. Over the next few weeks, the tour concept began to grow and flourish, with Animalia. In addition to the bovine contingent, ZZ wound up with 2 large rattlesnakes, a couple of good-sized tarantulas, some buzzards, and an irregular guest appearance by a tightrope walking baby javelina named Chapo. Barnum and Bailey didn't have a thing on Bill Ham for instincts. Actually, there was some solid thinking behind having all the critters around. They guaranteed massive amounts of free press coverage wherever ZZ Top rambled. The big steer and buffalo were originally stationed on fixed platforms, constructed to either side of the stage. That sounds simple, but it wasn't. Those platforms were about as easy to assemble as an oil derrick. It took more time and stagehands to put them together than the Great Pyramid of Cheops. So after the first few shows, they were abandoned in favor of movable, motorized lifts. The other animals were less of a trial. The buzzards rotated appearances, and when in action, were tethered on a perch behind dusty speakers. The snakes got a position at center stage in a padlock plexiglass dome, as close to the front row as possible. Needless to say, there weren't any security problems in this area. The stage set, designed by Brian Marshall, was a real masterpiece of invention. It was to be shaped roughly like the state of Texas, sloped towards the audience at 4 degrees, so that this could better be made out during concerts. The finishing touch to all this would be a 36-foot wide by 20-foot tall 3-dimensional backdrop panorama of an arid landscape consisting of 4 layers of netting contrived to look like a deep West Texas valley, complete with mountain. Special lighting effects would make it burn with the fever of a West Texas sunset or shiver under the icy gaze of a midnight moon, surrounded by stars scattered through the heavens like diamond buckshot. Lights, camera, music. By God, it was time for a dress rehearsal. Bill Ham had scouted around Houston for a good place to do this, and finally hit on the idea of renting the Astro Arena next to the Astrodome. It was the only place in town big enough. We immediately discovered that none of the parts of the show fit together right, and we would have to build that sucker practically from scratch right then and there. Everything was wrong. Nothing worked, nothing fit, and there was chaos in every cranny. The nooks were taken up by animals. We first managed to succeed by hoisting up that immense panoramic backdrop and found that with optimum lighting pressed to the max and beyond, it looked like the world as it must appear to a purblind myope. Reality through a dirty window. And then there was the matter of the animals. The platforms for the longhorn and the buffalo would have been comical if they hadn't cost so much. They served their intended purposes. They could hold the hundreds of pounds of animal with no problem. But they were made of solid iron and consisted of more pieces than a retirement home jigsaw puzzle. At the place where the contraptions had been fabricated, the welders had recognized that there might be difficulties with the multitude of parts. So to be helpful, each had been labeled for quick and easy assembly. Trouble was, there was no schematic provided, just a listing of parts and what each was supposed to hook into. The madness of construction got down to the last 2 days, and things were enough together so that it seemed like a good time for the band to actually play a few tunes surrounded by their new toys. Most people have the misconception that rehearse means to go through an entire show song by song, so that musicians and crew can work out all the lighting, effects, choreography, and whatnot. With Bill Ham, rehearse meant playing 10 seconds of the opening and closing songs around 70 or 80 times a piece, on the theory that these are the most important, maybe the only important, songs in a gig. Hearing only a few bars of Thunderbird over and over again was totally maddening. The only pleasure we got out of it was taken from watching the expressions of the 100-plus friends of ZZ Top who had showed up to eyeball the road show for free. They thought they were going to see a sneak preview of the new show. Instead, they got a sneak attack on their nervous systems and hearing. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, was the kickoff for the worldwide Texas tour. It was to be an outdoor show. Nice touch. ZZ Top played this lead gig loud. 35,000 Carolinians went home happy. That was all there was to it. After the show was over and the temporary musical fantasy had ended, cold reality gripped the ZZ crew in a stranglehold. It was time for the dreaded loadout. The normal time to load after an outdoor show, not counting the stage, is roughly 5 or 6 hours. 14 hours after it was born, at 2 p.m. the next day, the WWTT was finally loaded up and ready to roll. Following are vignettes that encapsulate the essence of the ZZ Top Worldwide Texas Tour. At the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, during setup the day before the show, the Buffalo managed to escape. Perhaps it was the prospect of another session of Texas Boogie. Perhaps he just saw his chance to break for freedom. But suddenly Tex yanked free from his handler and took off at full gallop. At an outdoor show in Nashville, the Longhorn, Texas, played the same trick on us as the Buffalo. He got loose at the racetrack during the show. 1 second, Texas was mulling over Nietzsche. The next, he had flat-foot leaped out of his 6-foot-high pen. The ZZ crew spent about 3 hours running back and forth along the racetrack, trying to haze our beef away from the ogling crowd and the inevitable injuries and lawsuits that would ensue if he had got loose among the Tennesseans. It was one of the buzzards' turns to provide a little adventure when we got to Washington, D.C. ZZ was playing the Capitol Center, which has a video system that projects immense images on 4 big screens hung at Arena Center. Naturally, we wanted everything to look at its best here in the nation's capital, so additional steps were taken to ensure this. The buzzard, which as usual was tethered to a perch just behind Dusty's speaker stack, proved to be a great instinctive showman. Whenever a white spotlight was trained on him, he would unfold his wings to maximum, a 6-foot span. This was pretty dramatic every time he did it, so we decided to feature him for the video. A crewman was detailed to put a light a few feet away from the buzzard so that he could be illuminated from below as well as from above to enhance the video footage. And we forgot about it for the moment. It was time for liftoff of the show. A bare 3 songs into the performance, Ralph Fisher came sprinting over to my side of the stage and whispered something into the ear of Bobby Gordon, the lighting technician who was on headsets with me. Bobby waited for his break in the cue calling and then spoke. "Dave, Ralph says you're frying his buzzard." It was in calm deadpan. We got the light turned off and the buzzard cooled down. And after he got a little water in him and was able to sit up, blinking and coughing, then he was able to go on and finish the tour. What a trooper. Alrighty then, I think we can end the showbiz madness at this point. I hope you all have a rockin' good week ahead, and we'll listen to our next recording on our YouTube Billboard Top 40 next week. Over and out until the next time we virtually meet.